Let's take a look at car insurance today. First of all, it's not only car insurance that we're looking at, but we're going to use car insurance as an example. Really what we're going to look at is liability insurance. And what liability insurance is a contract or an agreement with an insured person. And an insurance company agrees to pay injury or damage done if you're at fault. And there's lots of types of liability insurance. And we'll get into a couple of examples here in a second. The amount of money that the person who is being insured pays is called a premium, and you pay that premium to the insurance company. And you pay that premium for basically your liability insurance, and again, if you do something that injures or harms somebody else, that insurance company will pay for that damage rather than you being sued. Okay, some examples would be malpractice insurance. If a doctor has malpractice insurance, it would pay for the injury or damage to their patient if they did something wrong, if they were liable to be sued. A carpenter. My brother's a carpenter and he has carpenter insurance. If he would make a mistake, let's say roofing a house and the roof leaks and ruins sheetrock within inside the house and insulation in the attic and so on, he's liable for that damage to the house. He was negligent in performing his job. That would be covered with his carpenter insurance, which is a form of liability insurance. And then we also have liability insurance with a car. So let's look at some types of auto insurance, because I think it's good for us to know these and then realize that especially liability insurance protects us from the injury or damage that we do. So let's talk about that one first. Liability insurance is one that is required by law. You have to have it. And what liability insurance does is pay for the injury or the damage to the other person if you were at fault. So let's say that you were driving a car, you aren't paying attention and you run into somebody else. That other person has damage to his vehicle, let's say $1,000 worth of damage to his vehicle, and let's say $3,000 worth of injury to himself. Your liability insurance would pay for those injuries or damage to that person. However, it would not pay for any damage to your own car. If you wanted to have insurance that would pay for damage to your car, if you were at fault, that would be collision. Again, collision pays for damage to your vehicle if you are at fault. So in that accident I just said, your liability insurance would pay for the injury or damage to your the person who you ran into, and your collision insurance would pay for the injury or damage to your car. You may also have comprehensive. Comprehensive pays for things that are really out of our control. Sometimes they're referred to as acts of God. Things like hail damage to your vehicle or a cracked windshield. Those kind of things are covered by comprehensive insurance. It doesn't fit liability. No one's at fault for a hail damage to your car. It's not collision. You didn't get into an accident. So comprehensive is the type of insurance you'd want if you want to cover those things. We also have medical coverage. Medical coverage will pay for injury or damage to people in your vehicle if you are at fault. It usually goes hand in hand with collision. So let's say that you are driving your car. You have liability, collision, and medical. You run into somebody else. Liability will pay for their injuries. But in your car, you have two passengers, and both are taken to the hospital. Their medical coverage, or your medical coverage, will pay for their injury or damage, at least up to a point. That's the same thing with all of these, up to a point. And that point is how much are you insured for, certainly with liability and medical. So you may have $10,000 a person coverage. If that injury or damage, if the injury or damages are greater than that, it's still only going to cover the $10,000. For the liability insurance, if you have liability insurance up to $200,000 and the injury to the individual exceeds that money, whatever is above the 200, you are liable for still. We have uninsured motorist coverage. That's even though people are supposed to be insured, not everybody is. So let's say that somebody runs into you, they are at fault. Their liability should pay for it, but they don't have liability insurance. If you had uninsured motorists, that would pay for that injury or damage. No fault, again, it's kind of self-explanatory. Some accidents are nobody's fault. Sometimes in a parking lot, maybe we'll have an accident. The police come, they determine that neither party was at fault. Well, then neither's liability will pay for it. If you have no fault insurance, it will. Roadside assist are for those things where it's not really accidents, but let's say your car breaks down on the side of the road and you need a tow back to town, or you lock your keys in your car, or you need a jump start, things like that. Roadside assist would pay for. Rental reimbursement would pay for, let's say your car is out of commission for a few weeks, has to be at a body shop because of an accident, you have to rent a car. Rental reimbursement would reimburse you for those, or the cost of that rental car, excuse me. All of these things that we see here are types of insurance that you can get. Liability you must get if you own a car. The rest of these are up to you. You decide if you want to get them or not. If you get all of these insurance, it actually costs more. I mean, you pay for the amount of coverage you have. So if you just have liability, that's a certain cost. If you get collision too, then your cost of insurance is going to go up. Your premium is going to go up. Now, in things like collision and comprehensive, you have a deductible. And deductible is money that you pay before your insurance will kick in. So let's say that you get into a car accident, and your collision is going to pay for your injury or damage, or the damage to your car, and you have a $1,000 deductible, and it's $5,000 worth of damage. That means you pay $1,000, and then the insurance company will pay the rest. Okay, you have to pay your deductible first. There's a number of things that affect the price of car insurance. Some of these things you cannot change. Okay, things like your age. Younger people pay more for car insurance. Really, the age of 25 is when your insurance drops considerably, but younger people are going to pay much, much more for car insurance. The gender makes a difference. Females, at least up until about age 25, are cheaper to insure than males. Males will pay more. Now, why are these two things? Well, the insurance companies have looked at who is causing accidents, who do we usually have to pay out for, and it turns out that young people, and they pay out a lot for, and the same goes with males more than females, so they charge them a higher rate. Type of vehicle, not all vehicles are insured equally, so different types of vehicles are insured at different rates. Older vehicles are typically cheaper to insure when it comes to collision, not necessarily for liability. Accidents or claims, the more accidents you're in, the more claims that you make to your insurance company, they may raise the price of your insurance. If you have a good driving record, it's going to be cheaper. If you have a bad driving record, they're going to charge you more for car insurance. Grades make a difference. For most insurance companies, if you get good grades, this goes all the way through college, that your insurance will be less. How big of a deductible you have. You can decrease your premiums by increasing your deductible. It's not always the best thing to do, but that is something that does affect car insurance. Probably not something a lot of high schoolers are going to need to know at this point, but the more cars you have insured, they may give you a discount for that. And same thing with the amount of coverage. If you have less coverage, let's think of liability. If you have $200,000 worth of liability insurance, that's going to be cheaper than $500,000 worth of liability insurance. Just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's better. I'm not recommending anything. I'm not recommending to you to get collision or don't get collision. Those are things that you got to make those decisions on your own, or talk with your parents about, or whatever. But they do influence the price of car insurance. But just because something's cheaper doesn't mean that it's better, and that's important to realize. I'm going to not go with that, but I want to show you something that I went to Progressive a couple years ago, and I just looked up the price of car insurance on different things. So I kept everything equal, except for in this particular case the age, or in one example the gender. So I just found the price of car insurance for a Ford Explorer. I get full coverage, which is liability plus comprehensive plus collision and so on. An 18-year-old male for 1 year was $2,157. An 18-year-old female was $1,790. Now everything was identical. same driving record, everything except the gender. So you notice that males do pay a considerable amount more than females. Then I started just going with males on different ages, and you notice 25-year-old males, it drops considerably. Again, the insurance is exactly the same, but age makes a difference. 50-year-old males, notice it keeps go down, and then 70-year-old males, it goes back up, but not to the same rate that it was for 25-year-old males even. Okay, I did another vehicle. Okay, just so you see that not all types of vehicles are insured the same. 18-year-old male, $2,440. 18-year-old female, $2,023. Notice again that same pattern, and we'll see that pattern on all these. 25-year-old male, 50-year-old male, and 70-year-old male. And the same pattern will emerge on all. One more thing to show you here. This is the number of fatal crashes per 100,000 miles. This is why younger people pay more for car insurance. They get into more accidents. This is just fatal crashes, but nonetheless. Okay, the 16-year-olds are the worst, 17-year-olds and so on. 70-year-olds, they must start to get into more accidents, but it's even less than the 20 to 24-year-old. And that's why they pay more in car insurance. Really, it's probably more experience on the road. The more miles and hours you have in a vehicle, the better driver you will become, and that is why we get into less accidents at age 25 than we do at age 29. It's more experience. As long as we're doing this, let's quickly go through workman's comp. This is just a quick little thing here on workman's comp. Workman's comp pays for injury or damage to employees if they're injured at work. It's really an insurance that businesses have. Some things you should know: that workman's comp usually will compensate someone for their injuries and a portion of the salary, usually about 2/3 of the missed salary. So if you cut your finger, let's say at work, let's say you're slicing vegetables, you cut your finger with a knife, you need stitches, you go into the emergency room because the clinics are closed at that point. You go in there, it costs you $500 for the stitches and the doctor visit. Your workman's compensation should pay for that. What you agree not to do is sue your employee or your employer. So if you accept workman's comp, you're agreeing that you will not sue your employer. You can be denied workman's comp. Just because you're injured at your workplace does not mean that you will get workman's comp. First of all, if you're doing something that you don't need to do, if I as a teacher decided I'm going to change a light bulb, and I climb on top of a desk and change a light bulb, and I fall off the desk and I get injured, I may not get workers' comp for that because it's not my job to change the light bulb. Plus, I'm also not following safety rules. And if you're not following safety rules, you may not get workman's comp. A couple examples: if I'm a welder and I don't wear a mask and I burn out my retinas, I may not get, most likely, workman's comp will be denied. If I deliver pizza or something and I'm not wearing a seatbelt and I get into a car accident and I'm injured, I may not be getting workman's comp because I wasn't following the safety rules. So there is, just because workman's comp exists, it's important to know what it is. We also realize that it can be denied, and it is sometimes denied. It's not denied very often, but it is sometimes denied.